Hello friends, welcome to CEC Live Lectures. Dear friends, today in this session we are going to continue further in our series on cloud computing. We are specifically going to talk on cloud computing security, and for the discussion on the topic we have with us in our studios Dr. Kashish Ara Shakil. Dr. Kashish Ara Shakil is Assistant Professor in Department of Computer Science and Engineering, Jamia Hamdard. Dr. Kashish Ara Shakil is a dynamic professor, and through her we always get in-depth knowledge on various topics of cloud computing, and we believe that in future also we are going to get knowledge in the same manner. Friends, we know that you might have lots of questions while watching our previous sessions, and from today's session also you are going to get more of knowledge, as well as lots of questions are going to be struck your mind. So no need to be panicked, because we are here to give answers to your questions through this live session. For contacting us, please note down our toll-free number. Our number is 1-800-110-430. I repeat, our number is 1-800-110-430. Dear friends, you are requested to call in the last 10 minutes of the lecture only, as well as we request you to ask questions relevant to the topic only. Now, I would like to welcome our guest, Dr. Kashish Ara Shakil, once again. Hello, ma'am. Welcome to the
Hi. Hello everyone. We have already discussed about the different issues in cloud computing, and out of all the issues, one of the major issue which is the biggest hurdle for adopting cloud computing is the security issue. So since this is the gravest issue in cloud computing, therefore in today's lecture we will be looking into the in-depth of security issues. We will be looking at what are the different risks in the security of cloud computing, and then what are the different tools which are available at present to deal with these kind of security issues. So let's see what security in cloud computing is. Security in cloud computing is a broad term which refers to a set of policies, technologies and controls which aim to protect data, applications and the associated infrastructure. Since in cloud computing, as we have already discussed in the numerous lectures we have had till date, that data in cloud computing is stored at a third party location. So the users who had the ownership of the data, they are not aware that where their data is ultimately going to be stored at. So these users, they ultimately end up losing out on the control of their data, because they are not aware about the locality of data. Therefore, in order to protect such kind of data and the associated application and infrastructure, security is an issue which needs to be taken care of, and we need to develop certain policies at the service provider end. Service provider is basically the end or the end services provider who will be providing all these services. So all the security mechanisms have to be managed at the service provider level, and of course there are certain things which need to be handled by the client itself in order to make sure that a secure cloud environment is maintained. Cloud computing security is also a subdomain of computer security, because cloud computing ultimately it's a computer based technology. So the security in cloud computing is a subdomain of the computer security, the network security, and more broadly we can say it is a part of information security, because we are going to store all the information, all the data, all the applications, etc. in the cloud. So since this data, it is accessed via network, and of course it is uploaded, downloaded, everything is done via network. Therefore we need to make sure that the network which we are using for transmitting of data in cloud computing is also secure. Cloud computing security, it basically comprises of different categories. One, the very first category is the cloud service provider level security, and the second one is the customer level security, like I have already discussed, because in the cloud environment, in the cloud ecosystem, there are two major entities. One is the service provider who is going to provide these services, and another one is the client or the customer who's going to use these services. So security should be something which should be adopted by both the entities, so that we have a collaborative, sustainable ecosystem which is secure. So certain policies need to be adopted at the service provider level in order to ensure that the data is not misused, and certain policies need also to be adopted at the client level. Because if I am a user and I give my, for example, if I am a user and I give my username and password to some other person, so it might be possible that that person can misuse my data. They can just enter into my cloud domain and they can manipulate my data. They can, in fact, not only the client's data itself, they can even hamper the data of other clients as well. So these things need to be taken care of by the client level as well. Apart from that, there are different domains of security. There are different risks which are associated with security. There are different threats which are associated with security in cloud. Apart from that, there should be the delivery models like software as a service. There are different kind of delivery models in cloud computing, as we all know. These are software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. So we need to make sure that all the delivery models, whether it is software as a service, whether it is infrastructure as a service, or if it is platform as a service, all the delivery models, they have a secure environment. They have adopted the security norms, and we should be aware of what are the kind of security issues which might arise in different kind of service delivery models. So all these things need to be kept into mind when dealing with security in a cloud environment. That is the different categories, the different domains, and of course the issues which occur at different delivery models. Now let's have a look at what are the security risks of cloud computing. What is happening in cloud computing as cloud computing is gaining popularity these days. So with the increase in popularity, many people, they are moving towards the cloud. Many companies, they are moving their business towards cloud computing. So what is happening is that people, they get so much used to adopt usage of cloud computing that these companies, they are also increasingly storing their sensitive data in the cloud as well. So if the security layer at the service provider at which this data is being stored, in particular the sensitive data, if there are poor security measures which are adopted, for example, there can be storage of data without proper control mechanisms, such as the data is not encrypted, we just store the data in the cloud without adopting any layer of security, for example, without performing any kind of encryption technique, or we are not having any kind of authentication technique, not a proper authentication technique, and any user has, any other illegitimate user might have access to these cloud services in that case. So what happens is, these kind of poor mechanisms, lack of encryption techniques, lack of proper authentication system, they can prone the data to risk in cloud infrastructure. So here's a list of the common security risks which any company faces. This according to a study by Ponemon Institute. They have identified that there are around 9 risks which occur in cloud environment. The different risks are, first one is loss or theft of intellectual property. Then there can be compliance violations. Then there can be loss of control over the end user actions. There might be malware infections that might unleash a targeted attack. Then there can be any contractual breaches with the customers or the business partners. Then there can be diminished customer trust. Then there might be data breaches requiring disclosure and notification to victims. Then there can be increased customer churn and revenue losses. Now let's have a detailed understanding of each of these risks. The very first risk is loss or theft of intellectual property. Since we know that the companies, just like we just talked about, that the companies, they're storing their sensitive data in cloud. According to an analysis which was conducted by Skyhigh, that around 21% of the files which are uploaded to cloud, they contain sensitive data, and this sensitive data, it also includes the intellectual property data. So when a cloud service is breached, what happens is, whenever a breach to these kind of services, these kind of companies takes place, what happens is that illegitimate users, they gain access to the users' sensitive data. So if the users' sensitive data is available to illegitimate users, so what they can do is they can use this data in many for their own benefits, and they can perform theft of these kind of data, and of course the end users to which this data belongs, their data is at risk. Then what happens is that certain services can even pose a risk if their terms and conditions claim ownership of the data uploaded to them. So you must have seen that whenever we are uploading some kind of data, or maybe whenever we are using any kind of application, for instance, for even if you're using WhatsApp, or using applications such as social networking sites such as Facebook and all, you have to sign some kind of ownership and terms and condition kind of agreement before you are able to upload that, you're able to download that application. So you need to sign in some kind of agreement. So usually what happens is that if a service provider is asking you to sign an ownership this terms and condition agreement, and then in that terms and condition agreement, if the end user or the company, they take the ownership of your data, then your data can be at a major risk, and they can not only be risks to the intellectual property, these risks can be of very high magnitude at the in the long term. So theft of intellectual property is one of the major risks. Apart from that, there are other risks also which are associated, that is compliance violation and regulatory actions. So most of the companies, what they do is, at present they operate on some sort of regulatory control information. For example, there are different organizations such as HIPAA. This is an organization for management of healthcare data. So they have compliance violations and regulatory actions for any kind of information, any kind of private information related to health informatics. Apart from that, there's an organization called as FERPA, which is responsible for upholding and maintaining the confidentiality of the students' records. So any student's record should not be available to the general public. All the private and personal details about the students are kept hidden, and they're not accessible to general public via FERPA standard. Apart from that, there are many other government and industry regulations as well. So under these kind of regulatory actions and mandates, a company must be aware of the following. So if you are a user, generally what happens is I am talking about the general cloud scenario. In that case, you're not aware that where your data is, even at times you're not aware of the fact that who has authority to your data access, because you are just aware that I am going to use my data, but it is not always the case. You're not aware that where there might be someone else who might be accessing your data, and of course you are not aware that where your data is residing. So under these kind of mandates, the companies, they make the following things aware to the users, that firstly is where their data is residing, then who has authority to access your data, and thirdly is what are the security mechanisms that are opted to protect these kind of data. Then another risk is loss of control over end user action. So since in cloud computing your data is, of course, it is at the third party, so it might happen that when companies, they are unaware about the workers who are using their cloud services. So because companies, they have employees, so for me as an end user, I am just uploading my data to the cloud, but at the cloud service provider end also, there might be many employees who might be having access to my data. So it can be a chance, and of course it is human nature that sometimes some of these data, they can be manhandled by the employees of the organization itself. These employees can even they can conduct theft of your data, and they might misuse your data. For instance, it might happen that if there is some employee who is about to resign from a company, it might happen that that employee might steal the confidential records or the confidential data of some high profile clients, and then they might misuse this data. So it is a kind of loss of control and a kind of common insider threats which is very prevalent in the current cloud computing market, because the end user is not aware what is happening to its data. The end user has just uploaded their data to the cloud service provider's end, but it is not aware that ultimately what is going to take place at the cloud service provider's end itself. The service provider's employee might just steal away the data. Another kind of risk associated with cloud computing is malware infection that can unleash a targeted attack. So what can happen is that basically cloud computing services, they can be used as a vector of data exfiltration. So again, according to Skyhigh, Skyhigh is an organization. What they did was they were able to uncover a novel data exfiltration technique by which the attackers, they could encode their data into either video files, and they were able to upload it to YouTube. So just imagine the kind of infections which can take place. Even the YouTube files which we are using in our day-to-day life, they are not safe. So the attackers, they can encode the data, and then this data was uploaded as video files. They have after that they also detected a malware which can exfiltrate sensitive data using social networking sites, such as, for example, this organization Skyhigh itself, they were able to find out that a private Twitter account could exfiltrate around 140 characters at a time. So just imagine the grave issues which can occur due to malware infections, and they could unleash a targeted attack. In the case of severe malware variants, what can happen is the cyber criminals, they can use file sharing services to deliver malware to the targeted PCs, to the targeted bodies, using phishing attacks. So malware infection is also one of the quite grave kind of attack, kind of risk which can occur if you're uploading your data to cloud. Apart from that, there can be contractual breaches which can occur with customers or business partners. So what happens is, as we all know, that cloud computing is nothing but at the end it is a kind of business in which the two entities, so the service provider and the clients, they interact with one another. So it might happen that there can be some kind of contractual breaches which the customers or the business partners themselves can do. For example, the business parties, they can make contracts with they can make contracts which can restrict how the data is used and who has access authority to it. So it might happen that when an employee, they move the restricted data into cloud without authorization, the business contracts may be violated and legal action could also be taken off by the clients in such a case, because it might happen that they can be certain, sometimes it can be deliberate, but at other times it can also be by chance or unknowingly an employee can make certain restricted data of a certain client without having the proper authority available to other end users. So in this case, the contract can get violated, it can get breached. So of course, the only thing you are left with is you can take a legal action, but what is the use of it? You will be end up losing your confidential data. So for example, another example of this is that if a cloud service provider, it maintains the right to share all the data which is uploaded to the services with other third parties in its terms and condition, therefore it can lead to breaching the confidentiality of the agreement the company had made with any of the business partners or the client. So it is very important that whenever you are going for cloud computing, whenever you are going to subscribe any of the cloud services, you should read the terms and conditions very carefully, because in the terms and conditions itself, it might be mentioned that who has the right to data, access, etc. So such that your data is not manhandled or it is not manipulated. Another kind of risk can be diminished customer trust. So if as cloud computing is a business itself, so if there is a company who has a low business reputation, and in that company the cases, if there are a lot of cases which have been reported against data breaches, so obviously if a company has gained a bad name and has poor reputation, so what happens is these kind of data breaches, they can lead to reduced trust of customers on those kind of companies. So of course, if the trust is reduced and if you do not trust a service provider, what happens is you will not go and opt for their kind of services, for their services. So what will happen is there will be the reduction in the number of customers for that service provider and business loss. So this is also kind of risk which occurs in cloud computing. So in one of the largest breaches of data, of payments via data cards. So data cards can be your debit card, your credit card, or maybe some kind of gift cards. So in one of the largest breaches, a case was reported for a store called Target. This Target store is very famous in the West. So in this case, from this store, what happened was the cyber criminals, they were able to steal up to 40 million customer customers' credit and debit card numbers and other details. So after these details were stolen, what happened was the customers, of course they had to face several kind of monetary losses, but apart from that, what happened was that the customers' trust reduced on that store, that is the target store. Their trust got reduced, and the customers, they thought that it is better to stay away from these kind of stores, and their company's business was impacted very badly. Apart from that, another risk can be data breach, which requiring disclosure and notification to victims. So sometimes what might happen is, if there is some sensitive data which is put in cloud and a breach has occurred, a security breach has occurred, the company may be required to disclose the breach and send notifications to the potential victims. It is not like a breach has occurred and the company is hiding that from the victims, because then the situation will get escalated, because at some point of time the victim will actually get to know. So rather than covering up the crime or the breach which has occurred, it is always better that the service provider, they should notify the potential victims about such kind of breaches. So certain regulations such as HIPAA and high-tech in healthcare industry and European Union data protection directives, they require that such kind of disclosures should be made publicly and following a particular legal mandated breach disclosure, so that the company pays a fine to all the customers whose data has been breached. So we'll just stop here for a short break, and then we'll continue about other risks and what are the other potential issues in cloud computing after the break.
With this note, thank you so very much for giving us this session. Friends, we know that you are learning gradually and making most benefit of the lectures. Friends, you are requested to be with us, as there is lot more content for you in our store, so be with us. Thank you. Hello friends, welcome back to this session. Friends, as you know that today we are talking on cloud computing security, and through our previous session we tried to give you in-depth knowledge on the topic, and as promised, here we are again to give you more and more of information and knowledge. Friends, for discussion on topic, we have with us in our studios Dr. Kashish Ara Shakil. Dr. Kashish Ara Shakil is Assistant Professor in Department of Computer Science and Engineering, Jamia Hamdard. So friends, let's welcome our guest, Dr. Kashish Ara Shakil. But before that, we would like to share our toll-free number through which you can contact us and ask questions. Our number is 1-800-110-430. I repeat, our number is 1-800-110-430. Now let's welcome our guest, Dr. Kashish Shakil once again. Hello, ma'am. Welcome to the session.
So we were discussing about the different risks which can occur in cloud computing. So the another kind of risk which can occur is that there can be an increased amount of customer churn. So if a customer suspects that their data is prone to some kind of security breach or some kind of threat, so what might happen is, in that kind of case, the customer might think of moving their business from one company to another. So they might think that it is better to go and look for another company which is trustworthy. So what it can lead to would be that it would lead to an increase in the number of customers who get churned, because it might happen that then in this kind of case the companies or the organizations whose consumers are using cloud products or cloud services, these companies might instruct their consumers to not use the services of a particular provider and go and use the services of any other provider which is more trustworthy. So this is also a kind of risk which might occur in case of cloud computing. There can also be another risk is revenue losses. So like we have just discussed about the data breach which had occurred in Target stores, which led to loss of information about the customer's debit and credit card details. So in such one of these kind of cases, what can happen is that the company they might end up gaining such a bad name that the consumers might try to avoid such kind of companies. So this is what had happened with Target stores itself. So usually during the holiday seasons or during the major seasons like Christmas, etc., when the people they go out shopping, in such kind of seasons, these kind of stores, they usually earn a lot of money. But what happened was, after their data breach was disclosed to the consumers, what happened was that the consumers, they decided that they should avoid these stores, and this led up to about 46% drop in the amount of the profits which this company it made. So it led to around $148 million US dollar loss to the companies itself. And then what happened was, of course, one situation leads to another. Then the CIOs of the company, they ended up resigning overnight due to this security breach. So taking into mind the security is very important, because it can have very, very grave results, grave impacts in the long run. The company losing the revenues, the clients, and ultimately the employee itself resigning from it. After this, let's see what are the major security issues which can occur in cloud computing. One of the security issues is distributed denial of service. Then there can be other issues like phishing issues, data loss, etc. So let's have a look at these issues in detail. The first is the distributed denial of service attack. So what happens in a DDoS attack or a distributed denial of service attack is that what happens is that this attack, it attempts to make an online service or a website unavailable by flooding it with unwanted traffic from multiple customers or from multiple computers. So what happens is that they overload the website with so much of traffic that the website is ultimately, it is not able to cater to such huge traffic, and therefore it becomes unavailable because of this flooding demand. So this is a kind of distributed denial of service attack, or see, this is the meaning of distributed denial of service attack, that overload the website or a service with so much of traffic that the service becomes unavailable. The service is not able to handle this traffic, and it becomes ultimately it becomes unavailable. So due to large amount of resources available in cloud computing, it was earlier thought that DDoS attacks are very difficult to initiate, because as we have been talking about this illusion of infinite amount of resources with cloud computing, so it was thought that since cloud has so much amount of resources in such an abundance, that it is never possible that it might be susceptible to DDoS attacks. But with the increase in other technologies which have come up, like with increase in IoT devices, then with increase in smartphones and other computing services, even DDoS attack has become a reality in cloud computing now. So cloud computing is also prone to DDoS attacks now, due to these increase in these kind of IoT devices, etc. So if enough traffic is hit to a cloud computing system, so it can either go down entirely or it can experience difficulty. So it is, cloud computing is what we have talked about, is it is a kind of service which is made available in a pay-per usage mechanism. So at the end of the day, cloud computing is also a kind of service. So if you are overflowing, if you are overloading the services with the kind of with so much of requests, so what will happen is ultimately even this service, even though it provided the users with an illusion of infinite resources, even this kind of services, they can go down, or they might ultimately even they might shut down and might not be able to cater to the clients itself. Another kind of issue is the shared cloud computing services. Since what happens in cloud computing is that the data is stored in a multi-tenant environment. In a multi-tenant environment, that there are that the infrastructure which is being provided to the by the service providers to the client is ultimately it is being shared by different users. So even in this kind of environment, there might be some kind of security issues which might come up, because what can happen is that there might be some kind of threat which might occur from one client to another, because the infrastructure, that is the resources, the applications, the systems, they are shared by multiple tenants. So it might happen that this kind of threat, rather than coming from some outside source, this threat can occur from one client's computer to another client's computer. So even this shared cloud computing services, this is a kind of issue which you must think about before moving to the cloud, that the infrastructure you are going to use is not only being used by you, it is being used by multiple so it is used by multiple clients. So it might happen that your system might be infected from an infection which might occur from another client. So these things are, this is a topic in itself, the kind of way in which one system can infect the other client. Another is employee negligence. Like in the risks we have talked about, then even in the issues, employee negligence is a primary issue, which is very dangerous for the cloud ecosystem. So it might happen that employees, they can log into cloud solutions from their mobile phones, home tablets, home PCs, etc., and they might lead to threats. So it is not always that the employees, they are dishonest. It might be that for some maintenance purpose or something, an employee needs to access the data of the cloud clients. So in that case, sometimes what can happen is that the employees, out of negligence, out of lethargy, or due to any other reason, they might access a cloud solution which their organization is providing via their own personal mobile phones, tablets, PCs, etc. So what can happen is that in this case, these employees can basically, they can expose and they can make the data of the clients more prone to risks or security threats. Another kind of risk is data loss and inadequate data backups. So inadequate data backups and improper data syncing makes business vulnerable to a kind of cloud security threat called ransomware. So ransomware, it became very popular. So in this ransomware threat, what happens is that the ransomware, it locks a company's data in some kind of encrypted file, and once the ransom has been paid, only then the users, they can use their data. So this ransomware is a very classic example of data loss and due to inadequate data backups and improper data syncing, that your data is exposed to some malicious software, where that software, it locks your data, and then you have to pay for using your own data itself. So this is a very grave issue which needs to be handled and which can arise when you are going for cloud-based services. Another issue is phishing and social engineering. So since cloud computing is very open, users, they have access to cloud services from different geographical locations. So if you are having access to these cloud services from different geographical locations, there are issues which can occur due to this kind of openness of cloud computing. This openness has prone cloud services to phishing and social engineering attacks. So it might happen that after login information or any kind of confidential information or any other kind of login passwords, etc., or any other kind of confidential information can be acquired by a potential user, and then these kind of malicious users, they can break into the system with a lot of ease, because the system, as we know in cloud computing, is available from any kind of geographical location. So therefore it is also available for theft from any kind of geographical location. So the more are the advantages, so these advantages can also be act as a disadvantage in cloud computing. Since it is available from any location, it is also available for theft from any location. Therefore the employees, even the customers who are using this data, they should be properly trained to handle such kind of phishing and social engineering attacks. Another issue is that the system itself can be vulnerable. So system vulnerabilities is also a kind of issue in cloud computing, where the system, it imposes the vulnerabilities for networks, having complex infrastructures and multiple third-party platforms. So it makes the system more prone, more susceptible to attacks. So if a vulnerable system becomes known to any third-party system, so if a third-party system knows that this such and such system is quite vulnerable, it has poor security mechanisms, so this system itself, it can be used as a threat against the organization. So for such a case, proper patching and proper upgradation protocols must be adopted to handle this kind of threat. In order to handle these kinds of, we have discussed about the different issues in cloud computing, we have discussed about the different kind of risks in cloud computing, but in order to handle these kind of risks, we also have different kind of security controls. There are different security controls which need to be adopted. One is the deterrent control, then we have preventive control, detective controls and corrective controls. So what is a deterrent control? What deterrent controls aim at is that they aim at reducing the number of attacks on the cloud system. Rather than waiting for an attack to occur, they aim at reducing the attacks itself. So they are like, you must have seen that there are some kind of warning signs which are put up in front of certain properties on the fences that this place is dangerous, or in fact in movies you might have seen that there are some places which are labeled as mines, dangerous, if you will step on this place an explosion will take place, etc. So these are kind of warning signs which are put up. So in a similar manner, deterrent control, it acts as these kind of warning signs itself by pre-informing the people, clients, that such and such attack can take place. They will reduce the level of threat by informing the attackers about the adverse effects which may occur if they proceed, that if you do this, something dangerous might happen. So it is just aimed at reducing the cloud system by giving a pre-warning. Another kind of control is preventive control. Preventive control, it basically strengthens the system by reducing the vulnerabilities. Deterrative was like a warning sign. This one, it will aim at reducing the vulnerabilities. So this can be done by adopting strong authentication techniques and by preventing unauthorized users to access the cloud system. And these preventive mechanisms, they help the cloud users by being positively identified. So so authentication basically plays a very major role in preventive control techniques. Another one is detective controls. Detective controls, they basically help in detecting and taking appropriate actions to any incident that might occur. So the detective controls, they occur after some kind of attack has occurred. So in case of an attack, a detective control will signal the preventative or the corrective controls to address the issues, that okay, an attack has occurred, now this issue need to be resolved. So that is taken care of by the detective controls. So systems and network security monitoring, then it includes intrusion detection and prevention mechanisms to detect an attack on the cloud system and for the supporting communication infrastructure. So these are the mechanisms which are adopted for handling detective controls and for handling any kind of attack which has occurred. So it is for basically detection of attacks. Then we have corrective controls. Corrective controls are adopted to reduce the effect of an incident by limiting the damage. So if a damage has occurred, so if a threat has occurred, this kind of control, it basically aims at reducing the effect of this threat. How it does is, for example, if a system has been compromised or at a particular point of time, what corrective control we can take do at this time is by restoring the system back up, so as to rebuild the system as a whole from the point when the attack was had taken place. In fact, you also do sometime if you're trying to download some kind of software or something and your whole system it stops, what you can do is you can go back to a previous system setting. So in a similar manner you can restore your system as a whole if a system has been compromised. So this is a part of corrective control. So these were the different controls which could be adopted in cloud if a security threat has occurred. Now let's look at the different tools which are used at present to secure business data on cloud. So as we have already discussed that cloud computing, it poses issues related to data privacy, security, and of course the residency, that where the data is going to reside. There are also several tools which are available to handle such kind of issues in cloud computing. So what are these tools? Let's have a look at these tools. We have different tools like Bitglass, then we have Okta, CipherCloud, then Skyhigh Networks, Netskope, etc. And these tools were identified by Azif Khalik, and there are around 5 tools to secure business data. First is the Bitglass. Bitglass, what it does is it integrates different type of securities into one package. So all the different securities mechanisms, they are inbuilt into a single package. It is also able to detect the usage of cloud applications and also encrypt the data which is uploaded to the cloud. All this is handled by this tool. It will encrypt the data, it will detect the usage of cloud applications, etc. It can also track your business data anywhere on the internet, so that you can maintain visibility even when the employees they upload data into some personal file sharing services. All this is made available to the users. In addition to this, Bitglass, it also protects your business against the risk of loss or stealing of mobile devices, etc. Then it can also wipe data on a mobile device without the need to install any agents on the device. Another kind of tool is Skyhigh Networks. What Skyhigh Network does is it can discover, analyze and secure your services of the cloud, the usage of the services of the cloud applications. It what it can it does is it records keeps a record of the logs of data or the logs of access which is occurring of cloud services from your existing firewalls, proxies and gateways, and it enables you to quickly discover what cloud apps your employees are using. So employee theft, employee negligence, all these risks are taken care of by the Skyhigh Network tool. It is also able to detect the inconsistencies in security policies. If there is no any kind of inconsistency which is occurring, so it also detects that. It can also encrypt data and implement data loss protections as well. So it's a very good tool. Then another tool is Netskope. What Netskope does is, Netskope service it discovers and monitors the different cloud apps and shadows IT used based on the network. So just with the name, as the name suggests, it works on the network. Netskope it also monitors the users, their sessions, what kind of data, what kind of content is being shared and downloaded, as well as what are the details of these data which are being shared and downloaded, and It also provides you with a detailed analytics about all the information which is being shared. Then another one is CipherCloud. So CipherCloud is a security cloud software suite which works by encrypting or tokenizing data directly at your business gateway. So it does not aim to discover shadow IT, unlike the previous one, unlike the Netskope one. It does not aim to discover the shadow IT, but what it ensures is that the security of data which is contained within the cloud should be known, that everyone it should be aware of what all the security mechanisms are adopted. It encrypts your data during every upload session, and whenever you are downloading, it also decrypts your data. Then it also comes up with a built-in malware detection and data loss prevention tool. Apart from that, we have other tools like Okta, which aims at single sign-on for all the cloud services on-premise, and through either we are doing it through on-premise softwares or we are doing it using any kind of mobile applications. It ensures a single sign-on. It enables you to trace of any kind of user access to the cloud apps. So it is becoming very common and very famous with organizations such as Google, Microsoft and Salesforce.com. So these are all very big organizations who are providing cloud services, with which this tool has become very famous. Apart from that, there are various industry-wide standards which are being adopted for cloud security. So you can go through this in more detail, and these are the references which you can use for a better understanding if you need to go into the details of cloud security. I hope by the end of this lecture you might be aware of what are the security risks, what are the different issues, and what are the different tools which are being used in cloud scenario. Thank you.
With this note, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your deep inputs to the lecture. Friends, we know that you have lots and lots of questions in mind. If you are not able to contact us through our toll-free number and could not become part of our live sessions today, then you need not worry, because you have a provision of writing to us at info.cec@nic.in. This is the ID where you can post your questions, as well as you can write your feedback regarding the lecture too. All the lectures pertaining to the series on cloud computing are there for you on YouTube, and after watching these lectures, if you feel so that you have certain questions to be asked, then do write to us at the same ID. We promise you to give answers as Dr. Kashish Shakil will be back with us in our forthcoming sessions, where we'll try to give answers to your questions. We are taking your leave with the promise that we are going to meet again soon. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Once again.